For more on Iraq's economy, I spoke with Patrick Osgood, Kurdistan Bureau Chief at the Iraq Oil Report. The World Bank predicts its economy will grow around 7% this year, despite an ongoing war and terrorism. I began by asking Patrick how that type of growth is possible under such circumstances.
Iraq's economic growth is largely a function of its national budget, and Iraq's national budget is overwhelmingly reliant on its oil exports and the revenue that it gains from those. So a large part of what forecasters look at when they look at the ability of Iraq's economy to grow is they're looking less at these areas that are under conflict or under ISIS control and things like that, and they're looking at the core oil-producing provinces in the south and their ability to generate more oil at higher prices to sustain the national budget.
So how is the recent cut in the output of oil via OPEC going to impact Iraq's economy going forward?
Well, I think one of the most important things with these proposed OPEC reductions is they are proposed for now. Nobody's cutting right now in OPEC. In fact, everybody's producing more than they were last month. And there's a bit of a race on, particularly with Iraq, to produce as much as possible, but also to ensure that agencies that look at Iraq's exports are recognizing the full amount of those exports, so that for Iraq they will get to cut from the highest level as possible. So Iraq has made this commitment to cut exports, production in total, by about 210,000 barrels a day. Now, as with all OPEC producers, really the question is one of implementation. Are they actually going to do it? And that relies on a level of mutual trust, which is still open to doubt. And also, from what level are they going to cut? And for Iraq, in terms of what that means for its economy, that's very much predicated on the effect that any cut that they do make is going to have on prices.
Now, people always tend to think about oil when they think about Iraq, but what about other economic drivers? Are there any others that Iraq has that people may not be aware of?
Well, people have to be very realistic about the way in which oil does dominate Iraq's economy. It accounts for 85% of planned budget revenue. It accounts for, in reality, nearer 96% of actual budget revenue. And it accounts for the vast majority of GDP as well. Iraq has a lot of potential to grow in other ways. Those non-oil investments have been very severely affected by the ISIS invasion and the security crisis here. But those kind of could improve. So industry, refining, petrochemicals, infrastructure, healthcare, these are all areas that investors have looked at that they've pulled back from since 2014 in a significant way. But you're already seeing some interest from non-oil investors as they look to these large areas of the country that are back under government control, as they're looking at sort of normalization in sort of other areas.
As we look ahead, the country is shifting from this centralized economy to a market economy. How do you see that affecting the investment climate going forward?
Well, I think, again, at this point, it's kind of, Iraq is still dealing with fundamental structural issues about the way in which it spends money, the fact that it still has a very, very large bloated public sector, and it still has issues about regulation of its financial system, all these kind of bedrock things that investors look to when they want to know that their contracts are going to be honored, and that they're going to be able to interact with the government in a constructive way, because the government is still by far and away the main partner that any investor is going to come in and deal with. So those issues still persist. Where there's some scope for optimism, I think, is that the IMF has intervened very heavily to try and right the ship as Iraq has been wrestling with its huge fiscal crisis that's come about because of the collapse in oil prices and the war in ISIS. They are making a loan of $5.4 billion over 3 years, but really the valuable thing to Iraq is a significant level of engagement from the IMF to improve financial management, to ensure that key investors in the country, particularly oil investors, recoup some of the back pay that they've been owed, these billions of dollars. Those are on track to be repaid by the end of the year. And so when you have sort of big ticket investors, still largely going to be about the oil economy here, they look at that, and that gives some reassurance that with international assistance, the government is improving the way that it manages its own finances and is improving the way in which it kind of honors its commitment to its linchpin investors.